back to this week's episode of the Impact Cast. This week, we have Kids First. Sarah Stewart will be joining us. Kids First is a place where kids can be kids and healing begins. It says on their website, we are Lane County's Children Advocacy Center. Sarah, are you there?
I am. Hey.
Hey, how are you?
Great. How's it going?
It's going great. Sorry about my week intro. I'm not a pro, so I do my best. But Kids First. So let's start with a couple of years ago, or probably a year and a half ago, Kids First won an Impact Club event. Was it just over a year ago? I don't remember.
It surprised me that it could have been long, but I bet it was probably a year ago.
Probably right about a year ago. And at that time, so it's probably a year ago. So I think the donation was right around $10,000 or somewhere close to me. And I should have probably looked before, but I'm kind of lame like that and forget to do things like that. So maybe you probably know more than I do.
I think it was 10,200, maybe 10,300, something along that line.
Wow, not crazy.
I could have looked as well. I didn't.
Yeah, and it was interesting about that for me is, I didn't like a lot of local nonprofits. Sometimes they get put in the system and I don't know about them because we go out and we try to get them registered. And you were one of them that I didn't even know before the event. And right around that time, I stopped reading about the nonprofits because I kind of know who they are. I know who's coming up for being voted, who's being voted on. And so I stopped reading information about them so I could just try to be as objective as possible, not have any bias when I'm listening, to the pitch and everything. And so yours was pretty amazing. And I thought you did a really great job with that. And that's obviously why you won. And I didn't know anything I didn't even know Kids First existed. And then I was just like, man, I'm in, my profession, involves, fire, EMS and kind of a different side of that life. And we see one aspect of child abuse, criminal things that happen around children, all that type of stuff. So it was really cool for me to see the other side of that, which I was thinking was really interesting. So maybe you could just kind of fill in everything that I left out about what Kids First does and
Sure.
kind of let everybody know.
Yeah, we do kind of joke around here that Kids First is one of the kept secrets because you're not the only very involved person that can go ahead and heard before. We're working on that.
Yeah.
So Kids First is the Children's Advocacy Center County. So essentially what that means is that if there is a kiddo who has disclosed child abuse, or if there's some concerns of child abuse, which for us typically is child sexual abuse, child physical abuse or pretty severe neglect, or have witnessed domestic violence or other violent crime, then they would come to Kids First for services with their non-offending family members if there are any.
Yeah.
Some of our services include, we have our forensic interview, which is really that one-on-one recorded interview with the child and one of our specially trained forensic interviewers. That's really our core service. We also do forensic medical exams. We do employ a physician and are actually hiring for a second physician right now. So we can do those nice physical where we can, of course, document any kind of evidence, but more than that, really reassure kids that their bodies are okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So that piece is really important too. We have victim advocates here who are really working with families through each step of the process because most of the kids and the families that we've served, they don't have any experience with the criminal justice system, so they don't know what to don't know what the detective's role is versus what child welfare's role is and the prosecutor. So really that's our team's role, is to kind of help them through that process and offer some even criminal justice support there. We also host grand jury hearings here at our center instead of at the courthouse, which is actually one of the services that I'm most proud of, just because that is Children's Advocacy Centers are a national model, but grand jury hearings are not part of the model. It's really a unique service to us.
Wow.
And so it's pretty exciting to be able to offer an opportunity for kids to testify in front of the grand jury without stepping foot inside of the courthouse.
That's pretty amazing. So how does that work with a grand jury hearing? I mean, that's definitely pretty interesting and something I've never even heard of. So the victim or the child just is in your facility and the grand jury is watching by video, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I mean, during COVID times, things are a little bit different, but typically during typical times, no, they're not watching by video. So we in Oregon, the law says that that defendants have the right to face their accusers. So typically, if there's a trial or a court hearing, then typically children would have to testify. That doesn't mean they have to testify in grand jury, but it's a really good opportunity for them to practice testifying without having a defendant or a defense attorney there, so that they can get a little more comfortable with it. So most of the time, the prosecutors do have them testify at grand jury. It's a very short testimony. Most of the time, they are coming in, they get to meet with the prosecutor, they introduce themselves, and then they have the jurors there on site as well in the room. And then the child, usually the prosecutor asks them questions like, do you remember coming to Kids First? Do you remember talking to the forensic interviewer? About the incident that occurred? Did you tell the interviewer the truth? They're just asking and answering those types of questions. They're not going into a lot of detail about really what they experienced, because most of the time they play our forensic interview for that piece, so that they don't have to retell their story, but it also still gives them the opportunity to testify, to answer the prosecutor's questions, so that they're kind of developing a bit of rapport in case the case does end up going to trial. Most of our cases don't go to trial. I mean, the evidence collected from even the forensic interview itself is pretty strong. And so a lot of times there are, guilty pleas, and the grand jury hearing is really the closest that kiddo gets to a courtroom. But you never know, and you can't predict that. And so having the child, and really their parents, sometimes parents are testifying as well as witnesses, so having them have that bit of an experience and meet the prosecutor can be really helpful.
Man, I couldn't even imagine being a child thinking that, it's hard enough. Like, I think probably showing up to your facility is probably amazing, but that still has to be one of the hardest things ever, and take a lot of courage and to go through that whole process. But then to the reliving, right? Like if you had to tell your story and then tell your story again, then tell your story again. And I know that happens in many places where that's a thing that, one person will interview, then they're interviewed again or interviewed again. So that's gotta be trauma, adding to the trauma of dealing with that horrible experience that they've dealt with. But it doesn't sound like that's the case with you guys then, right? Like you guys do the interview.
It's not. No. Yeah, well, and that's why advocacy centers like Kids First were created, because they found, and the first one was created in Huntsville in '85, I think.
Yeah.
And so they're still fairly new. We've existed in this community since '94. We were one of the first 100 centers in the nation.
Wow.
So our community has really thought, and our DA's office specifically thought that this was important work. Kind of supported getting this created back in the '90s. But they found that, not only did, when kids would disclose abuse, they'd be interviewed by, let's say, a teacher who they originally disclosed to, and then probably by a police officer, and then maybe at the emergency room, and then often by child welfare. And so not only are they being re-interviewed multiple times, which is exhausting, but also depending on what questions are asked and really how they're asked, the information might look a little different. And as you can imagine, that builds not a very strong case either. And so then offenders weren't being held accountable, and kids were exhausted. And some of them would really describe the criminal justice process as more traumatic for them than the actual abuse that they experienced. And so they thought, we need to do better. And they created this model, which is an evidence-based model that's really been put together across the nation, and then also in other countries as well. There are about 900 centers in the nation now.
Wow. Yeah, I couldn't imagine dealing with it at that level of stress at that young of age. You're right. It would have to affect you for a really long time, which is.
It's a lot to ask of kids. And so even having one child focused setting, which that's what our setting is, it's a place where we bring all of those professionals here to meet with the child. But the setting itself is child focused, and it's really safe, and it's not a police station or an emergency room. And so hopefully we can help children and families feel really safe and empowered, and then they aren't in a situation where they're feeling traumatized or scared.
It's like a safer place for them to feel really good. How do they get there? So the abuse happens, right? A traumatic event happens. Maybe they're dealt with, on my side of things, on the paramedic level or on the fire side where we help them, or with the police initially. What's the transition over to Kids First look like?
Yeah, we get almost all of our referrals from either child welfare or law enforcement. And
Okay.
so for really almost all of our cases, we have law enforcement involvement. And so, I mean, I described
Yeah.
the type of cases that we see, the abuse types. And so you can imagine that, especially as mandatory reporters, that like child sexual abuse, witness to domestic violence, those are all really criminal
Yeah.
things. And so we don't really do a lot of interviews or anything like that without law enforcement involvement, because it's really important that they're involved
Yeah.
at the front end. And so typically we're getting those referrals from child welfare or law enforcement. Occasionally we will get referrals. Now that we have a physician, we get referrals from other medical providers for especially those younger kids who, where there hasn't been a disclosure, but maybe another primary care physician or ER physician is seeing something that they find suspicious or concerning, and so they want a second opinion from our physician,
Oh,
who's a child abuse expert. She's been doing this work for over 30 years, and so
wow.
they'll refer cases over to her as well. And so for her to either do a review of their case or for her to see the patient.
Wow. Okay. That definitely does sound like it's a good transition. So you're not just being put all over the place and then finally getting there. It sounds like you guys have the direct connection
No.
to where it has to be. So that's pretty amazing. So I know you guys recently just moved into your new facility. And where did you move from, and what did that look like, and where did you move to? Because I know it's a lot bigger and it's a lot better, and you can actually serve the community, a lot more with where you're at now.
Yeah, we were leasing a facility from Lane County,
Okay.
on kind of on the, it was on the Servo campus. So
Oh,
the
okay.
across from
Yeah.
Watson Stadium. And so
Oh,
it
okay.
was a really great for us, actually, because it was a great facility because the county gave us a great deal of really affordable rent.
Yeah.
And it really worked for us when we were a smaller agency. So we were there for quite a while, but then it got to the point where we really expanded staff and we were expanding the number of kids we were serving, and then it just didn't meet our needs anymore. We didn't have enough room for staff. We didn't have enough room to serve as many kids as we needed to serve, and so we had a wait list of at least a couple weeks, if not longer, for services.
Okay.
And so when we moved into our new facility, that one was about 3,000 square feet, and our current facility is 9. So
Wow.
yeah, so it gives us room to expand our staff. It also allows us to serve kids right when they need it. And so while during COVID-19, we can't have a number of families here at the same time. And so we
Yeah.
do sometimes have up to 2-week wait for services, but we're obviously triaging. So if someone needs services today, we will get them to them today.
Okay.
If the services are needed a little less urgently, then they get pushed out a little more. So we are able to do that instead of before we had a couple spots in the day, and that's really all that we could fit in due to the size
Yeah.
of the facility.
Okay.
And
Wow.
the importance of confidentiality.
Yeah, no kidding, for sure.
Mhm.
So, I was just thinking about something. The kids and everything that come through, and then they come from there, or your old facility to your new facility. Gosh, what was that? I just had something right on the top of my tongue. I can't remember it, but I wish I could remember that one thing, but I thought it was important at the time. So anyways, well, moving forward, like probably the one thing that, I was just realizing as you were speaking, like, me on the fire side of stuff, I'm able to deal with like the emergency and then shut it off, right? Like, so I go in, deal with the issue, take care of it. Can't affect me. Typically I can, I know the process that I used in order to kind of pass it off, so that way I can kind of just put it away where it needs to be and I'm good with it over time. I could imagine, like, everybody in your field, like in dealing with everything that you see in all the cases and stuff. So I don't see that level. I may see the initial trauma of something, but not, and very, probably a lot rarer than than what you see all the time. How do people deal with that at Kids First? What do you guys do? I know everybody's different, but you got to see a lot of bad things.
Yeah, well, and so I think everybody here would probably answer that question differently. And everyone who works as part of our multidisciplinary team, even like law
Yeah.
enforcement and the DA's office and stuff, they would all probably answer the question really differently. I would say for me, yes, we absolutely see a lot of bad stuff. But
Right.
ultimately, we also really get the privilege of seeing kids who are so resilient. Like, you can read a police report, and I'm sure you've seen reports like that. You can read a police
Yeah.
report, or you can get a statement from somebody at the scene and you're like, wow, this kid has experienced horrible things. But then you meet that kid and the kid is like joyful and, you know, they're ready to come play with you and sit down, and they're, you know, they certainly talk about their experience. And they, most of the time, especially for older kids, absolutely recognize that that experience was traumatic, but they also are still, you know, doing pretty good in school and they're ready to get in counseling. So I feel like for us, it's nice because you can see that, yes, something really bad happened. Ideally, we can also see that a defender gets held accountable for that. That is something that personally is something that helps me when I'm seeing some of these things, but that's not always the case. But then also we get to see children and with supportive family members who are helping them heal and get on that path to recovery, which is really important. We don't want to just see dark things all the time. We really are inspired by the resilience of kids.
So you tend to look for the light, kind of what I see or what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
You look for the better side of it. You look for the better things. You look for the light in the person. And then you realize, you know, this is what I'm just thinking how you might think of it is you realize that they've been through something horrible, but they are dealing with it and you guys are helping them have a better outcome, which is.
Yeah. And I mean, I personally don't believe that, child abuse, even if a child has experienced multiple types of abuse, it doesn't have to define their life. And so I think if I believed that it did, it would be really hard to do this work, but I think we see every day that it doesn't.
I think that's a pretty powerful statement, really, thinking that the abuse doesn't have to define their life. You just have to hopefully give them the skills and ability or put them in the direction post like what's going on to not allow it to define their life, you know, which is cool. And that's kind of the one thing I love, like about, you know, like Kids First and just other nonprofits that serve that, you know, area, because like when you're in the, you know, the children age all the way through teenage years, I mean, you're so still forming who you are. And if you can give people help right at the right places, I mean, they probably will go on to do amazing things, you know, and it could be just a time frame in their life that they were affected, but then it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't define their life or who they are going to be in the future, which is super cool. I remember what I was thinking when I was stuttered, stopped, and restarted. How many kids per year do you guys serve? That's kind of a thing that I was wondering. It's like you have a huge place now, but you can take more people in. You must serve a pretty decent amount of kids per year.
We do. So typically we serve somewhere between 600 and 700 children from across Lane County every year. Wow. And so we serve the whole county. I feel like that is a really big number, but at the same time, when you consider the population of Lane County, it might not sound like a huge number, except when you are considering that the services that, you know, we're only serving children and families included in that number are ones where there's law enforcement involvement as well. So these cases that really rise to that level that could be criminal. Child welfare is certainly serving a lot of families for neglect and other types of child abuse cases that we don't even see most of the time, because it's really those higher level cases, and then those numbers are really high. And I have to tell you that it's, you know, it's a weird year, as you know. But so we moved into our facility in December, and then in January and February we were serving kids as usual, and our volume for those 2 months was 20% higher than the previous year. Wow. So we were really getting a ton of referrals. And then of course in March and April that kind of stopped. We certainly still got referrals. We were still open, but like at this point, especially where we can't serve as many families at the same time, our volume is a little bit less. But I think if we had a normal year, we would see an increase from the over 600. I think it's 630 kids that we served last year and their families. I think it probably would have been higher if COVID didn't happen. But I'm sure that you read that within 2 schools being closed, mandatory reports being made to the hotline, the child abuse hotline, went down by over 50%. And so when you consider that that abuse needs to be reported to get to us, then it's not really hard to figure out why the numbers have went down.
Right.
I can tell you that we're still seeing a lot of kids, not as many as we saw in January and February, but despite the fact that a lot of kids don't have access to mandatory reporters, we are absolutely still seeing them. But I can also tell you that some of the abuse that we're seeing is even more severe than we would typically places.
Really? Wow. That's horrible. I mean, in my book, even having one case of abuse is too many, which,
I agree with you.
so, but you're right. When you look at like the population of Lane County and the amount of kids that you're seeing, or even kids right through young adults that you're seeing up to probably 18, that's probably a lower percentage, especially since you're seeing those critical cases that come all the way through. Question for you, Sarah. How did you become, you're the director, right? How did you get into the position that you hold at Kids First?
Well, I actually started at Kids First in 2011, and I started as a volunteer.
Okay.
So I've had that kind of a long,
Yeah.
had kind of a long history with the organization of almost 10 years. And I started as a volunteer victim advocate, which is really that person whose job it is to walk families through the process. I originally, a long time ago, when I was a kid, I came through the center with my family.
Okay.
And so I was really familiar with the services that were provided and really always wanted to get involved. And so after I finished my undergraduate degree, I started volunteering here for a little while. Then I ended up being hired as a paid staff victim advocate as well.
Awesome.
Eventually I became like our program director or our assistant director. And then when the executive director position opened, which I think was 2017, I started in this new role. So we've done a lot of our direct service positions first. And I do like doing administrative stuff too. And so it's been a really good fit, I think, for me, because I have such a deep knowledge and real passion for our programs that being able to now work on the strategic direction of the agency. And one thing I didn't mention in our last facility is that, it was too small. I mentioned that, but we really have a need to add mental health services. That is one of the big healing pieces for children and families that we don't offer on site right now. And in our new facility, we're going to be doing that. So we're hoping to launch our mental health program in the fall. We do receive a lot of state and federal grants.
Okay.
And so we are looking at like other state agencies' potential budget cuts. And so we're still trying to figure out, like, can we still launch it in the fall? Or are we going to have to wait until 2021? But it is in the works. It's happening. Okay.
Awesome.
That's really exciting.
So you obviously you get, your grants and stuff like that. What other things do you guys do to raise money? I saw your Wine-tasia. I've seen that on Facebook. I've seen a lot of other things with that. So what's your biggest thing that you guys do? And then what else do you kind of do?
Mm-hmm. Well, for fundraising, Wine-tasia is our biggest annual event of the year. That's it. It's usually about 300 people at Sylvan Ridge.
Awesome.
And it's such a fun event. It's a really amazing event, and it's a really great fundraiser as well. But of course, this year we can't have 300 people at Sylvan Ridge. Like, we just can't, because it's so we're like, what are we going to do for our biggest annual fundraiser of the year? And so our development director and our board kind of launched Wine-tasia at Home, which is what you've seen advertised. Wine-tasia at Home is a really fun adaptation, especially because if you've never been to Wine-tasia, you should. It's super fun. It's really a beautiful space. Of course, Sylvan Ridge is amazing. But then it also, there's dancing. There are a bunch of restaurants that are there donating their food, but they have like these really amazing like bites and treats, and you get to like vote on which ones are your favorite. And so they do that every year. But as you know, local businesses, including local restaurants, are really struggling right now. And so for us, it's sponsored by Northwest Community Credit Union. And so they are still sponsoring some, so we are able to actually pay restaurants to participate to help cover their costs. So it's a nice way for us to get support, but then also for businesses that typically are supporting us every year to also get some extra support. And so we're partnering with our Wine-tasia restaurants to do at delivered to your door, no contact delivery, food and wine packages.
That's awesome.
wine, and then Sassy Cupcakes. And Gretchen from Sassy is making a cupcake out of Sylvan Ridge wine, which is really
No way.
for the event. Yeah.
Okay.
And then restaurant gift cards. So gift cards to some of the Lancaster restaurants, and you can pick which restaurants you want. Okay. And so that is linked on our kidsfirstwinetasia.com website.
Okay.
But so there's a whole bunch of different types of packages, but yeah, so we launched that, 3 weeks ago, and actually packages are over halfway sold out, which is really exciting. But we were just trying to figure out a way to still raise funds without having our biggest event of the year. So that was what we came up with.
That's a really cool, creative way to kind of keep fundraising going, because that's always the pursuit for a nonprofit, right? I mean, you always have to be thinking grant money and stuff is great, but that additional stuff that you need to grow. But I would say that's probably one of the most creative things that I've heard of a local nonprofit doing to kind of keep the funds rolling in that direction, which is pretty awesome and creative on your guys' part.
Thanks. We were really grateful that the businesses were ready to jump on board as well.
I know, that's what I love about Lake County in general, Eugene, Springfield, the area is the local businesses are such an amazing group of people for sponsoring a lot of the nonprofits. There's so many great ones out there that really truly care about our community, which is awesome. So kidsfirstcenter.net, I'm looking at that. That's right in the center of that. Just for people looking or watching this, they can look at the Winetasia event there. It's directly in the center of the thing. As we wrap up here, what are some ways people can get involved if they're really interested in Kids First? How can they help? Obviously, donations.
Obviously, donations, yes. So donations are always being accepted. I think any nonprofit would tell you that, especially right now during an economic downturn. For sure. But so donations of funds are always being accepted, but we also have a list of things that are needed. So for example, right now, we've had to do a ton of adapting, like everybody else, on how to serve kids and families safely. So we have a playroom, we have toys, we have all that stuff at our center. It's one of kids' favorite parts about our center. But that with the additional, the germ factor right now just isn't going to work. And so we are purchasing activity bags for kids. And so when kids come in, we're putting a mask in them. So that they have them when they leave the center. We're putting a mask, we're putting bubbles, we're putting crayons, depending on kids' levels of age levels and interests. We have card games and things so they can play games with their siblings when they get home. And so we're buying all of the supplies to make take-home bags for every kid. Awesome. So we have other things. We have Amazon wish lists and stuff that people can purchase things off of there too, instead of just donating funds. Winetasia at home packages. If someone is interested in getting further involved with the organization, that is I would just suggest reaching out to me.
Okay, cool.
Just because there's a lot of ways to do that. So sometimes, some people might be interested in board membership or committee membership, or maybe even volunteering. We have to deliver all the Winetasia packages, which is expected to be more than 80 packages at the end of July. And so some people might want to just help us deliver packages that day. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved. And so depending on people's interests, I'm happy to talk to them about that.
Awesome. Cool. And what is your best contact information for somebody to do that? How about your email?
My email is Sarah, SARAH, at kidsfirstcenter.net.
Cool. Sarah at kidsfirstcenter.net. Okay, Sarah, with that, we're going to wrap this thing up. Is there any last amazing words that you want to add? It's already been just a great episode with you, chatting back and forth. Kids First Center does amazing things here in our community, and I can't imagine any child going through the system that, through the legal system and not having an advocacy center like Kids First. I mean, it just seems like a no-brainer and a mandatory thing that should be funded. But anything, sorry, I'm long-winded. So anything that you would like to add to wrap this up?
I don't know that I have anything else. I just want to thank you for Impact Club and also for Impact Cast and the keeping people engaged and keeping things going. I feel like I talk about Impact Club a lot because I do have a lot of friends and acquaintances who are interested in getting involved, and they're not sure if they're interested in getting involved in a club or they're interested in getting involved with a nonprofit, maybe serving on a board or whatever. And so I said, like, if you don't know what you want to get involved with, like, check out Impact Club, and here's all the reasons why. But I also think, in addition to the fundraising impact that you make for nonprofits, I imagine as a club member, you really get to be introduced to all of the great work being done in our community, and probably can get introduced to the nonprofits and help find that organization that you're really passionate about to get involved with. And so if I have friends who want to get involved, but they're not sure where to start,
ImpactClubEugene.com for sure. Sign up there. That's my own plug. No, I think that's the cool thing about Impact Club is for me, like, you know, I realized my time was limited as to what I could do. Like, and I'm like a bleeding like heart, want to give all my time away and help everybody that I can. And I was like, what's the best way that I can still serve and still do all the other million things that I'm trying to accomplish in my life? And for a long time, I was kind of going back to the theory, like, well, I'll give later when I'm older. And, you know, and I did stuff early in my early days of the fire department, I organized like Fill the Boot and all those things. But I was just like, no, I'm going to go, you know, build my business with my brother and do, you know, our investing stuff and handle all that. And I go, we'll give later. And then one day it hit me. It's like, you know, so many businesses give now. And I was like, we should just make it a part of our life and our structure. And that's kind of one of the cool things about like what Impact Club has kind of given me, even though I can't spend all my time on it, which it's where I want to spend my time and all my money. But you know, it's like you can't, but so like, that's kind of the cool thing. Like, I can still give back in that aspect and still push this amazing cause along to help all the nonprofits. And then, you know, and the next thing with that, like we've been doing all the Impact Clubs for so long, and I still didn't feel like I kind of knew the nonprofits. You know, it's like I'd hear them, I'd talk to them, and I kind of had an idea. They did. And so, and that's kind of what inspired me to come up with this Impact Cast thing. I was like, and at first I had these big ideas of all this awesome stuff I was going to do. And then I realized, you know, like, I'm just going to start small, you know, and like do little things like these small interviews so I can go and talk to people and just further connect. So when I'm out there, just like how you maybe push Impact Club, I can like talk to somebody and they need something or they're interested in something about nonprofits. I just start going through my Rolodex of nonprofits in my head. I'm like, you should volunteer here. You should help out here. You could do this. This is what this organization does. And so I just feel like that's kind of my calling, you know, for as far as an Impact Club, kind of pushing that direction and helping people with that, which has kind of been a really fun thing for me, my brother, you know, my wife, Shelly, to kind of do. It's been awesome. And, you know, I think just everybody, the support from everybody's been amazing, and getting to really know like all the great services that are actually here. And which is another interesting thing. Early in the fire department, I didn't think we had a lot of services, you know, because I had like a small window of what we could help with services. And I can tell people all day long when I'm out on the streets now of all the local nonprofits that will help them take care of any issue that they have. And so that's kind of the cool thing about it. And it just keeps that networking going with everybody, you know, for your side of it, our side of it, the community side of it, which is the most important, I think. So. Awesome, Sarah.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for what you do.
Thank you for what you do. I think yours is probably way more important than what I do. So with that, I'm going to sign off of this episode of Impact Cast, Eugene.